Board. Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is October the 11th, 2019. Strong hand. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. Value your wealth in Bitcoin. Offended by selling. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Unconfiscatable conviction. Be a unique beast. Oh, I've got you a unique beast right here. You think I'm a unique beast? This dude is a freaking unique beast. You all know him. It is Gabriel D coming in from some undisclosed location somewhere on this planet. Welcome to the show. Look, I got a new shirt that says, what's it? Where in the world is Satoshi Nakamoto? You can get shirts like this linked to below, but hey, Gabriel, great to have you back, you unique beast, man.
Thanks, Adam. You know, Satoshi's actually in the next room, so that's where I am. But I am on Earth. I do disclose my planetary location.
Okay, because you do believe. Well, I don't want to get into what you believe that's beyond the Earth and whatnot. We can talk. We probably disagree about that. But now we're going to get into something that, for me, it's beyond my Earth. I wish this was off planet. The IRS. Why do they have to be on this planet? Why do they have to be in this country? You know, I said I'm offended by selling Bitcoin. I am offended by the IRS and its crypto ignorance, okay, and what they just came out with the fork. So I'm going to read you something by Matt Corello here, and I want your take on it. He says, IRS, please audit me, claiming I owe taxes on hard forks and airdrops I didn't know about. Never could practically legally convert to fungible assets and never did receive. I'd very much love to bring this in front of a judge. So he's talking about the recent guidelines that and it's linked to below, and Gabriel Devine is linked to below, by the way, too, if you want to check him out, that the IRS, they were trying to clarify things. It wasn't very clear. What they said about the crypto dividends, the forks and the airdrops was insane, and I don't think they know what the heck they're talking about over there. But what's your take on it?
It's ambiguous, right? So, I mean, every law has some degree of ambiguity, but tax law is some of the worst. And in this case, this is like an especially egregious instance. And specifically, I've noticed that a lot of people are focusing on this verb receive. And I'm totally not a tax attorney. I'm not an accountant. My knowledge is, layperson level when it comes to tax. But, it is interesting to think about what receive means. Like Matt was saying, like, I have no idea about Bitcoin Palladium, you know what I mean? Or what, some crap fork that somebody tried to scam other people with. And it's like, just because I could use my Bitcoin keys to claim this shit fork, excuse my language, crap fork, that is out there, just because I could doesn't mean that I quote unquote received it. And what does receive mean in this instance? How does the government prove that I have taken possession of the coins on a fork chain? And that really raises the question about enforceability in general that Vortex was talking about on Twitter, which is you can't enforce this. It's the same thing, it's like the under the table job, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, I'll bartend for your one-off party and you're going to kick me down $60. They can't really enforce that. Now, when you're talking about digital money and crypto, whatever, people are often specifically using cryptographic tools in order to hide the activity. So then the enforceability is called so seriously into question that it becomes a joke.
I want to know if you think, I'm beginning to think that they just want to freak people out so much that they want people to self-report, just tell them themselves, basically. I mean, it almost seems like that's why they leave this ambiguous, or that they just have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, I would say that is their MO in general. Like, they want to scare people into paying them. I mean, it's extortion, right? It's classic extortion. If you don't pay them, we're going to lock you in a cage. We're going to hunt you down. Men with guns will come after you. If you try to fight them back, we're just going to send like a huge platoon after you until we overpower you and throw you in a box. And this is no different. That's their general MO. And it's really just in this case, such an egregious example of overreach. It's totally retarded. But basically their idea is any money that you make, we own a bunch of it because we're providing the infrastructure and the protection. It's basically a protection scheme, right? The mafia comes around to your store. They say, hey, we're going to protect you from the other Guidos that come around here. So you got to pay us 15%. What a deal, huh? Those cops ain't going to protect you. We got Vinny out here. Comes around every 6 weeks. He's going to check out your property. You pay us 15%. Everything will be great. You'll be protected. And, with a protection scheme, ideally, if you run into problems of coercion and violence, you genuinely could go to them. Whereas if you went to the police, they're going to be ineffectual. Whereas some mafia guys, I mean, if they're actually running a legitimate protection scheme, they might actually be able to protect you. Whereas with right? With the U.S. Military in its excursions around the world and stuff, it's extremely questionable whether they're providing security or just extorting.
All right. Classic protection scheme. All right. Pound that like button, people, if you don't like the IRS. And I know. So we'll see how this progresses. What other clarifying statements might come out in the future if they pick on anyone. We shall see. I'm not freaking out about it. I don't think I clearly think they're trying to scare people, and mostly they don't know what the heck they're talking about. And Vortex, again, I said it on Wednesday's show. Vortex said it best. Best of luck enforcing this IRS. Okay, moving on to another government issue. God, the government likes to get involved in this type of thing. And hey, specifically from someone from California, Maxine Waters. You had spent some time in California in your day, so you know of Maxine Waters. Well, she wants to have a hearing in a couple weeks here. It's going to be called an examination of Facebook and its impact on the financial services and housing sectors. Okay. Mark Zuckerberg will be the only witness. While details were sparse in Wednesday's press release, noted that committee chairwoman Maxine the Wig Waters has drafted the Keep Big Tech Out of Finance Act. Previously, Waters had called for Facebook to halt development of Libra until lawmakers' concerns were addressed. The draft legislation prohibits large platform utilities like Facebook from becoming chartered, licensed, or registered as U.S. financial institutions. Okay, she's scapegoating, she's blaming everything in the world on Facebook. Facebook might not be the greatest company in the world. They might spy on you, et cetera, et cetera. I say this is where the big boys play. Let them print their own money. Let them be their own financial organizations. There are lots of corrupt financial organizations. Why them? Why? She's grandstanding, I think. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I'm almost 100% sure. What's your take on it? Is this going to be a big deal when Zuckerberg testifies?
Probably not, because it's kind of like a one hearing in a long series of kind of ups and downs and different corporate sponsorships, corporate partnerships, and government crackdowns and partnerships and bribes, just huge bribes behind the scenes. But one thing that I'd like to bring up that this really reminds me of is Mr. Robot. It's a TV show. It's in its 4th season now. It has Sam Esmail, the producer, has a lot of issues stringing together a plot after the first seasons. It's a real problem. But one of the things that they did absolutely nail in the 2nd or 3rd season was the giant corporation, E-Corp in this show, which is like a combo Google, Facebook, Apple almost. They launched eCoin, which is exactly as a centralized digital thing, and it wasn't working. And then the CEO had dirt on a senator or some high government official, federal, and basically blackmailed him into allowing E-Corp to create loans, which is banking, of course, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, those are the two functions of banking is lending and, securing and holding, right? Capital for other people. So they didn't want to allow it. Like Maxine Waters is saying now, we're going to disallow that, oh, you can't have a banking license, or you can't print this, this digital currency international thing because we're not going to give you a banking license in the States. It's funny because banking licenses in general are completely crony run. The whole idea of you can't do this financial activity unless the protection scheme guys let you is totally coercive and authoritarian. So the idea of a banking license in general, where they're like trying to make fractional reserve safer so that it doesn't actually work. It's only, there's all these countries in the world where they don't have a giant military to, steal from everybody at will. So if there's a bank run, it just collapses. And this whole idea of, they had a banking license and so it's insured is BS, because there's so much more outstanding that if everybody wants to pull their money out, the company will immediately fail. So it's kind of like a, lipstick on a pig all the way down, right? It's 26,000 lipstick on pigs. And, but it really does remind me, right? It really does remind me of eCoin, where, unless Zuckerberg has enough dirt from spying on Maxine Waters' Facebook messenger and seeing about her lesbian pedophile murder carnivory, what's it called when you eat people? Cannibalism, yeah. Or whatever, some horrible dirt where he can be like, hey, now we are getting a banking license or your career's done. And I wouldn't be surprised if they pull something like that off. It has not much to do with Bitcoin. Just like in Mr. Robot, they handled it really well, where they must have talked to a lot of hackers and got the real story, because that particular sort of plot, actually worked really well, because he was like, Bitcoin is reaching its maximum and people can't use it all the time because it was before Lightning Network. It was right at 2017. They were writing. It was really well done. And then it was like, here's our alternative. We got to issue bonds or loans, and we can loan the US government, and you guys will owe us back interest, and you're going to go for this right now. And that's exactly the kind of thing that the corporatocracy and Silicon Valley technocrats would love.
So do you think, I guess it's a two-part question here. Do you think Libra should exist? And do you think they'll let Libra exist?
Should. I try not to should on situations. I think that I personally believe that they should be free to create this scam. Go for it. And do I think that they will succeed? Well, so there's this guy, Cliff High.
Well, Gabriel's on the show. He can talk about, you see, I let people talk about things I don't talk about. Pound that like button. Go ahead.
Yeah, Cliff High is this guy, and he's written some weird predictive software where he analyzes everybody. It's very woo-woo. He's trying to analyze everybody's subconscious psychic messages and compile them into predictions. And he's got a pretty decent success rate, actually, but it could just be him being smart and putting together his data in a smart way, because he's a smart guy. He's a clever guy. And he's maybe just doing a good job parsing through some data and seeing what people are talking about now, and just kind of drawing out some things that he thinks are going to happen. And he has a pretty good track record, not necessarily with if you pluck any particular prediction, but something like 50% success rate historically, which is ridiculously good for just random predictions about human society, weather. Everything, anything you can think of, Bitcoin price, crap coin prices, whatever. So one of the interesting things that did come up repeatedly in his reports when he was still publishing them into 2018 was that the deep state would attempt to create, they would attempt 3 times to create an international currency, and all 3 would flop. And the first one, he specifically said, is the SDR, right? Which is this thing that does exist, but it's not really getting a whole lot of traction as far as I know. It's a basket currency where they're popping together all the different countries' crap coins, the yuan, the dollar, euro, everything, and they're trying to peg an international currency, which is exactly what Facebook wants to do with Libra, right? Yeah. It's exactly the same thing, but it's just controlled by a corporation instead of the IMF, I think, which is behind the SDR, special drawing rights, right? So this is basically a limited currency only if you're really good friends with the jerks at the top. So that's really interesting because they did the SDR, and then there's been a few different attempts to create these digital, basically crap coins, token, useless tokens. There's the Petro, right? That was a limited, not an international one, but he specifically, did say, and it was one of those things that came up repeatedly, that there's 3 times and all will fail, and Bitcoin will go on through the decades. So that's kind of what I see. I think that Libra may be allowed to launch in the next 10 years, but it's going to have limited user base, in my opinion.
All right. Now, you did say when you were talking about eCoin, comparing it to Libra, I like that, that it's not Bitcoin. And we all know that it's not Bitcoin. But it seems to me there are a lot of people who are quite confused about it. And it's taken some of the hits for Bitcoin, too. When the vibe toward Libra was, when they thought it was going to happen, Bitcoin price took off. Now people have been worried about Libra. Bitcoin price has been down. So there have been some people out there are mixed up. Do you think this will be an attack vector onto Bitcoin, in the sense that the government will shoot down Facebook coin and then go for Bitcoin? Or might it deflect some of the attacks on Bitcoin?
Okay, so definitely no to the first question. Whether it will deflect some of the attacks, maybe.
Deflect some of the attention, at least, I would say.
Yeah, certainly it will it's already deflecting attention, which is kind of interesting, which is really good. But the thing that's, it's very clear and sort of direct why that is. And the main difference is it's completely and totally centralized, and Bitcoin is decentralized. And so they have somebody to go after and pester about Libra, and there's nobody to go after and pester about Bitcoin because nobody's in charge, and you can't attack it. And anytime you do, it will backfire in your face. So yeah, how is the connection right now? Is it okay?
Yeah. For a second it was, but it's a convenient scapegoat. Facebook is a convenient. They can use.
Yeah, that's why I think it could actually deflect some of the attention, because once again, as you pointed out, the understanding is still nascent when it comes to these assets, and many people could get confused. So yeah, it could deflect some of the attention. I think it kind of already is a little bit.
I hope, what you also said, I hadn't even thought about it. I hope he does have some dirt on Maxine and all the people over there, and he implies to them nicely behind the scenes, you're going to let me have this because I've got access to all your info. That would be great. Yeah. I think that would, but I think it should. This is where the big boys play, I say. Let them create whatever they want to create. They should be able to print their own money, just like the United States could print its own money, just like Russia could print its own money. People have to get used to, we're going to talk about how this is the second decade of Bitcoin. People got to get used to this new paradigm where it's not just countries that print money. It's not just countries that print money anymore.
I've got one word for you: Meister coin.
Pound that like button. It won't be happening. All right. So let's move on to something. We're talking about financial systems, the whole worldwide financial system here. Let's share a tweet by the great Liberty Blitzkrieg, Michael Krieger. You retweeted this, and again, follow Gabriel. It's linked to below. I know it doesn't seem like it yet, but central banks are very much losing control of the narrative. This will become very clear over the next 12 months. You agree with this?
Yeah, I do, very much so. I really like Michael Krieger, Liberty Blitzkrieg. I think he's at Liberty Blitz. And I would consider him, an acquaintance, a friend. We've chatted a few times.
He's been on the show before. I've met him in person. He's a great guy. He's a good guy. Very good.
Super cool. Super on the level. Really great guy. I'm probably way more out there than him, but he's got his finger on the pulse. And I really like his perspective. Although I'm also more might call freedom, like I'm more of a freedom extremist. But Mike has been talking about banking for a long time because of his story. He was a trader.
Yeah.
2008 happened. He was absolutely flabbergasted that the Federal Reserve was picking and choosing winners out of the 2008 debacle and not letting the market let the chips fall where they may. And he was absolutely stunned that they stepped in to save, and they let Lehman Brothers crash and they saved everybody else. And it was this whole thing where he was like shocked, and that completely changed his career because he realized, oh my God, this is like way more corrupt than I realized. And and so he changed his career. He now is more of a commentator. He doesn't do, as much in, large scale trading. He's not involved in the banking industry directly anymore, as far as I know. And so I think and like I said, he's got his finger on the pulse of financial people, financial industry, and community, social environment, culture, let's say, finance, right? I call it old finance, right? Yeah. And he's specifically, the word he used in that tweet is narrative. And that's so important now because people are attempting to understand a rapidly shifting landscape through the lens of stories, through the lens of, everyone has the stories that they tell themselves about the world. And these stories are memes in themselves. In other words, they spread and multiply and are in culture, and they're shared and altered and shared again, and they explode like a virus in culture. And people dedicate mind space to these stories and these narratives, right? It's a framework or context with which you can understand a series of events that are happening that could be unrelated. This is what Sam Esmail needs to figure out with his show, Mr. Robot. Like, dude, just because there are events happening doesn't make it a plot or a story. So these events of what the Federal Reserve's messaging, the Federal Reserve's actions. Recently, we had a panic in the repo market, which is the overnight lending market between large institutions. And basically, what's happening there is the same as what's been happening for decades, which is that they're financializing, they're rehypothecating and repackaging these loans and selling them to each other, and then leveraging. And then when something moves, so that's basically like, oh, cool, I can, when something, let's say it goes up 1 point, cool, I can actually make 10 points on that because I've leveraged it 10x, right? But what happens is if there's an outsized move, a black swan, as it were, then boom, immediately everybody gets liquidated, right? People either win a ton or, they say make, but it's really win. It's kind of like gambling. But really much more common is their account immediately gets liquidated to the bottom. And a lot of these, it's because it's lending, and the whole system is based on a series of promises. This is the debt paradigm. There's oftentimes only promises at the base layer. Like there's no asset at the base. It's a loan that you're hoping that somebody will pay back. So it's promises. And when that goes away and the bottom promise, this person says, I'm not gonna pay back that loan, then everything collapses and vaporizes. Just like money is created out of thin air by the Fed, debt is extinguished back into thin air instantly. And with these type of situations, with these debt markets, that's what happens when there's an outsized move. So the repo rate shot up from 2.3% or whatever which is already high, to like 10. And then people just into millions or billions were lost, and nobody could get a loan for an overnight thing. So if the Fed hadn't have stepped in, there would have been a much larger chain reaction. Instead of just the traders losing their bets on the debts, it would have been a large company, billion-dollar size companies, not able to meet their payments from one day to the next because overnight lending, right? So they wouldn't have been able to pay, and then there would have been a huge spate of bankruptcies. And the Fed considers it its mandate it's completely illegal. Actually, it's an unconstitutional situation entirely. It's totally a big giant scam where if you're buddies, you know, if you're golfing with the guy, then you'll get the loan. So the Fed's like, oh, the repo market needs, okay, cool. We've just got a button here and just created 60 billion. So now you guys can play with the 60 billion and everything's cool because that was the shortfall. They're just kind of plugging the hole in the dam, right? So the dam is incredibly cracked after 2008, and they've just been basically trying to plug, and now really the cracks are widening. And Mike just pointed out that the narrative of, oh, we're the good guys, we're trying to help and sustain the economy and stuff. So many fewer people believe that now, that we're heading toward a crisis in the near term.
You know, I think the average man on the street doesn't even know about this stuff, though.
Oh, no. He's specifically talking about the professionals who base their daily decision-making in their day jobs on the Federal Reserve's actions. But those people, 10 years ago, they didn't really question it that much. Then there was the crisis, and then more and more people have questioned it. And now it's reaching maybe a crisis or what you would call the what's that point called? The
tipping point.
Tipping point.
But first of all, it boils down to, so what he's saying, or what you might be saying here, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that the big financial players are going to lose confidence in the United States dollar. Because the solutions to all the problems for the last 11 years has just been to print more money, bail everybody out. It's been working. That's been the narrative. Everyone believes in that narrative. I don't see people believing in that narrative. But you see that. You see that in the next year happening. It's they're gonna lose confidence in the dollar. That's what it boils down to, I think.
Yeah, I think that's going to start happening. So basically, like, I think it's like a domino effect a bit, where first you lose confidence in the officials at the Fed, then you lose confidence in a specific statement, then you lose confidence in the people making the statement, then you lose confidence in the fact that there's an officer that's even allowed to make that decision, then you lose confidence in the system that they've created that is in crisis and panic, and then you start basing your decisions on that, and you start buying, say, gold or whatever, and selling your dollars. And only once these realizations and the narrative shift has already played out in the markets and begun to affect prices, jobs, industries, and stuff, then finally it'll trickle down to the man on the street who's like, hey, this orange used to cost $1 and now it's $1.75. Wow, that's terrible. I can't feed my kid. Like, they'll be the last domino, right? Yeah. So, but I agree with you. But yeah, in the next year, I think the narrative shift will be really powerful and available to see. But it's going to take another, say, 4 or whatever, 5 for the echoes of that to play out.
For me, people have been talking about this for so long. I think they'll keep on finding ways of pulling it off. Negative interest. We haven't even gone into the negative interest rates yet. They haven't pulled that out of their butts yet in America. We'll see.
I think they will. And I think Japan is a great thing to look at. It's 3 lost decades. They basically took the socialist approach of paper over the crisis with as much debt as you can, and just prevent all of these zombie zaibatsus from going out of business. A zaibatsu is a large industrial concern, they call them, or it's like a conglomerate. It's, imagine, 57 industrial companies all under one umbrella. There's these large zaibatsus in Japan, and basically they all were going belly up in 1989, and the Bank of Japan said, oh, well, we're all Japanese and cool, so let's just all be friends, and here's a couple $100 billion worth of yen, and just stay in business. And what happened was they hollowed out the economy. People work 3 jobs. The economy there is absolutely been in the toilet. And in 1999, they called it the lost decade. In 2009, they called it the lost 2 decades, and now they call it the lost 3 decades. And that's what I think we will see, except now we have Bitcoin. I don't think they've got 3 decades. I think they've got 7, 9 years or something.
Well, see, we do have Bitcoin, but who is we here? I think the people, Japan, they loyally worship the yen still. They still buy over there. They're still spending. Sure, they might not be creating all these new innovative businesses as much as they would have if they would have done the correct thing economically, but they're still living their lives. It's still a pretty pleasant place and everything. But if the same situation were happening in the United States, I think there would be so many people that would just go with the flow. They've got their big house, they've got their big car, they've got their nice technology, they could buy a lot of nice clothes, and they'll just do their thing. But there will be some of us that will know better, that will not want to work 3 jobs to get that big house with 3 garages, that will opt into Bitcoin. So and this is, I guess, a good question for you. I don't see hyper Bitcoinization happening. I don't see the majority of people ever getting into Bitcoin. I think the fiat, some form of the US dominated fiat world will continue to exist. But the smart people will get into Bitcoin. I don't think everyone will get into Bitcoin.
Yeah, it makes me think of something that, oh gosh, what was that guy's name? There's an author out there, I don't recall his name. Quite interesting guy. I've never read any of his books, but I've seen him speak a few times, and he's talking about something which was also mentioned in The Sovereign Individual, interesting book from 22 years ago, where they predicted a lot of the stuff that's already happened and much more in the future too. They were speaking about a bit more striation in society as a result of the empowerment of the individual through computation and networking technologies. And so the idea with it is that what this other author called it is the barista class, right? Where people who either aren't intelligent enough or not hardworking enough, not disciplined enough, whatever it is, or too unlucky, end up working a more manual job, or
Starbucks,
blue collar. Yeah, baristas, right? So it's basically whatever robots haven't been able to get to yet, they're able to fill in, but it's sort of bottom of the rung work, and then a large gap between the barista class and a technocrat class, or a technologically savvy class. And this is actually very similar to how European society, and American too, it was a younger country back then, but 18th century, you look at the 18th century and you had gentlemen, and it wasn't just a matter of birth, right? It wasn't just a matter to be a gentleman in, say, English society in 1780. It wasn't just a matter of you were a nobleman, like a son of a baron or something like that. You could be the son of a rich merchant and still be a gentleman. The idea was that you had been educated and that you were a man of means, and you would have a valet. The valet would be what we would call a barista class now, right? This is somebody who maybe couldn't read and write, but they could lug your trunk around, or call you a carriage. And I think that's definitely the direction we're heading. So basically, it's similar now. It's just that the haves are going to go from this tiny elite of, say, 300 families or whatever it is, and that's going to explode and be tens of millions. But that's still only 1% of the population. Maybe up to 10%, could be several hundred million. But then other people might be left in the dust just due to their natural abilities. However, I do believe rising tide lifts all boats, and the barista class will live more comfortably than maybe upper middle class of today. Nevertheless, I do see that gap reforming again, because in the 18th century, you could have a sword cane and a gun on you. It was really hard to, attack. Like this power was a lot less centralized. We all came of age in the 20th century when power really peaked, and the authoritarians in the 70s was the peak of authoritarian power. And since then, it's been decentralizing. And Bitcoin is an extremely individual, empowering technology. And so we're heading more back into this paradigm of, really, fiat is the quote unquote money of slaves. It's the currency of slaves. Silver is the money of gentlemen, and gold is the money of kings. It's the same. It is already now, but it's going to be that much more visible. Bitcoin will be the money of the, I actually wrote a novel 5 years ago. I finished my novel, and it's a science fiction novel. It's called Feed Forward, and it's about AI and marketing, but it takes place in the near future. And I call them shakers. basically the idea is anybody with enough get up and go and a bit of smarts and ability and a little luck can become an entrepreneur. And that's actually where we are now, where you can become a blogger and make a living and blah, blah, blah. Anybody who's a self-starter and really going for it and trying to do their own thing, like Adam, is what I call a shaker in my book, because like movers and shakers, right? They're the people who are really doing stuff in society. I call them shakers, and that's this exact same thing. It's the opposite of the barista class. It's the entrepreneur class, the people with a little bit of means, at least, and a lot of maybe natural talent and certainly discipline. So I want to say, you know, the future is really bright for everybody, but I definitely see much greater amounts of what leftists like to call inequality. Even though everybody will have access, the access will be much more democratic than ever before because people will be coming online. Smartphones will be $5, you know, all that stuff. Anybody who has the desire and a modicum or enough ability to enter the world marketplace will adopt Bitcoin and become a shaker. And shakers is not like businessmen and entrepreneurs as we thought of them in the 90s, say. It was kind of a special thing. Like, wow, you're an entrepreneur is a little bit like rare. Now it's already kind of normal-ish, but it's going to be like a actual serious class in the future where there's 15% or 22% of the populace or 40 even
20
are just entrepreneurs. And if you work for somebody else, I mean, literally you're a slave. And so if you're smart and you want to become a shaker, you're going to be saving in Bitcoin. And then at that point, you're going to be like, hi, thanks so much for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed working for you. I'm going to go on my own now. That's going to be really normal. And so, but we're going to see this striation. If you're a little bit mentally disabled or whatever, you'll be a barista. But I'm thinking that there's going to be some amazing technological advancements that will make those people's lives, you know, comfortable too, but they won't have means. They won't be able to start a lot of stuff.
This is beautiful. Golden age of the 2020s is just starting out now. What you described, the people familiar with this show know, what he described as a shaker, I describe as people in motion. They're not just sitting there. They are in motion. This is the time to get in motion. This is the time to get into Bitcoin. There are going to be a lot of people complaining to Elizabeth Warren in 8 years, 4 years, saying, we didn't know to get into Bitcoin, bail us out, take their money. Anyone can get into Bitcoin now. Anyone can be a shaker. Anyone can be in motion. But the majority of people will ignore it, and they will want someone else to take care of them and live the – but still, as you say, the rising tide lifts all boats. They're not going to know it, but their lives are going to be so much better in 5 years, 10 years than now because of the technology that the shakers and the people in motion. It's just the income inequality. I don't believe in it either. It's pure envy. There's always going to be inequality in a free market system. And you shouldn't worry about how much money Bill Gates has. You really shouldn't. You should be trying to be in motion, be a shaker, do your own thing so you're not a slave. These people end up being slaves to envy, and then they end up being slaves to Target or wherever they end up working. It's just, and this is just a great time to be alive in this golden age where everyone's got a chance. Everyone's got a chance to get into Bitcoin and to do their own thing right now because of technology. So you've summed up so beautifully what I try to say on this show all the time. So you see, pound that like button. We're on the same page here, baby. This is good. All right. Let's move on to, well, you hit on, do you want to mention QE5? You hit on it a little bit. You think there's going to be a QE5? I mean.
Yeah, it's already started. This repo thing is QE5. They're trying not to name it that. It's just more injection and saving, picking winners and losers. So, I mean, the losers are anybody that, you and me, right, in that situation. So luckily, we have an excellent life raft. But, so, no, we don't need to talk about it. Let's just say the expansion that, and the repair on the dam is now long in the tooth. A solid 10 years, if not 11. And it's reaching a breaking point soon. I think next year is going to be a huge year of crazy shifts. We're not going to understand it as much until the next year. And then through the 20s. I don't actually see the 20s as the golden age. I more see the 30s, because the 20s is when everything comes out and everyone gets excited, but it's so new and crazy and it's still distributing that it's just a shock. It's like the 20s, it's going to be the roaring 20s, where there's going to be crazy things happening and new, incredibly new things. And then the 30s is when we'll have that base layer of technology to lift those boats. And now I think of the 30s more as a golden age, but we'll see.
It's a good theory. We're gonna have to play around with these new technologies that are coming out, and some of them are going to be earth shattering. Some are going to bust for a while too. We'll have some booms. That's a good way of looking at it. I will say, you mentioned before the show IPO implosion we just had. Yeah, are you referring to what's that one?
WeWork.
Yes. Okay. So we'll still have, in the next decade, we'll still have people try to pull off these type of things too, where they say they've got some great new, okay. No, you don't think they'll be able
I think there will be less, because for a few different reasons. One of the reasons why these manias and bubbles are enabled is fiat, right? So there's all this, new currency that's created and given to the chummies of the people with their finger on the trigger at the Fed, and the banks give it to their buddies, and golf, etc. So what I see happening in the 20s is a mass vaporization of bezel. Now, bezel is a back formation word from embezzlement. It's funny how that happens with words in languages, English for sure. Embezzle, there wasn't actually a bezel word before that, as far as I know, but it's a back formation. It's the idea of the portion of the economy which is derived from fraud, essentially. This is a term, I believe Mircea Popescu might have come up with it, or maybe he borrowed it and just that's where I found it. But bezel is fiat, all of the fiat, all of the debt, the stuff that I mentioned before, which is created out of thin air and extinguishes back into thin air. That's bezel. Bezel is all the extra hot air in the economy that's not based on anything real. Now, you can take bezel and do real work and create some wealth with it and use it as a leg up, like Amazon or something, even though Amazon is still fueled by a lot of bezel. But there's this portion of the economy which is fraudulent. All those ICO projects is bezel. But really, the Fed and traditional central banking is like a bezel machine. And that is a key concept to understand, because I believe that is the main financial transformation ahead in the next decade, is mass extinguishment of bezel and people becoming hyper allergic to bezel and just having no patience for it anymore. So IPOs are a perfect example. The Silicon Valley bubbles and stocks, that is a perfect example of bezel. Basically, the central banks create a bunch of currency and give it out to their buddies, and the buddies are like, let's put this into something that we can try to make a return on. And stocks are the number one, method to do that. So there's all you have to do is go back to this classic sketch that everybody knows now from 1912, right before they created the Federal Reserve. Some intelligent editor at a magazine in the States had their illustrator draw a picture of a giant octopus with big sharp teeth sucking coins out of all the institutions and barfing them out into Wall Street, into the stock market. And that's exactly what it goes on with bezel, and they blow up these giant bubbles full of hot air, and then it just extinguishes. We're going to see mass extinguishment and mass vaporization of bezel and frauds over the next 10 years. It's going to be a huge shift societally and culturally, where people will be so skeptical of these things, and there won't be the gambling because there won't be as much fiat out there for them to spend on it, because the fiat will be depreciating so fast that they won't even, like the whole fiat machine will be in the process of collapsing, and people will become, investors will become far more conservative. And so the malinvestment crisis that has been building for 106 years will vaporize, and the entire culture will shift, not on a dime, but over just a few short years. The entire culture will be different, and all the young Gen Z will be real confused by everything that came before, and it will seem normal to them. But millennials and everybody older, it's going to be a massive cultural shift that we're going to undergo and see.
It's a very logical scenario that you put out there. Not that I necessarily agree with every point of it, but it makes total sense. What I was thinking though is that we will enter there'll be so many new technologies, the nanotechnology, all sorts of, that the investors won't even understand what some of this stuff is. And some of them will be so excited about it. And there'll be all these little companies popping up that are going to be doing the nanotech, doing the self-driving cars, doing this, that people will be throwing money at them. But if there's not as much money out there, then that won't happen. So that's your take on that, definitely. But
well, I would say that they're not those two sort of patterns of behavior or actions are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. You can have tons and tons of speculation, but just have a generally more careful level of inspection. You know, the WeWork prospectus for their IPO was absolutely retarded. Yes. And anybody who would look into
no one looked numbers, at it. No one read it. I don't think anyone read it. Did anyone? I mean, that was incredible.
Yes, a lot of people read it, but SoftBank did not read it. So now they're $5 billion in the hole, because I think they did read it and they were just like, you know what? Nobody else is going to read this, and they're just going to pour this free money, because they don't know what to do with it. And then the tide went out and they were the naked ones. So I think that you're going to have situations where you're not going to have unicorns like that. You're going to have scrappy startups like you were describing, where it's like, hey, we just did our technology demo in Pasadena, and we've got nuclear, low nuclear reaction, or whatever new technology we've got, it totally works. We've got it. So jump on board. And I think we will see more ICOs, but it's going to be a bit more tempered. Certainly Bitcoiners, won't be sending out their Bitcoin to somebody else's address easily, like in 2017, as easily as 2017, but there still will be plenty of speculation and plenty of investment going on, but it won't be fueled by that debt underneath it. Silicon Valley VC companies love to say, well, we don't really do that much debt. We're mostly investing proceeds and capital that we've developed. But it's like, okay, dude, a lot of the companies that you're investing in had access to debt, and that they won't have. They would never have had that in 1915. They would never have been able to get a bridge loan for $6 million for the year just to get them across until they have another million users. That they just wouldn't have gotten it. So I think that we're going to get into a place where there will be plenty of speculation, but but lending and interest rates will be far higher. So your idea must meet a much higher bar and sooner. People are not going to have maybe quite as much patience for an Amazon to take 18 years to reach break even. They're not going to be able to borrow that much debt to do it.
Well, speaking of the tide going out and revealing SoftBank, tell us about the cruise you were on, the Bitcoin cruise from in Southern California. Tell them what happened. Who was on it?
Well, I got to hang out with Thomas from Mad Bitcoins from the World Crypto Network for the very first time. I've been doing shows with him. Yeah,
I've hung out with. Oh, wow, you hung out with him after I met him in Colorado, actually. But keep going. No.
Well, I'd never been to a Bitcoin conference, just a couple of meetups. I had spoken at Neil Woodfine's meetup in Northern England, right at the peak of the bubble in 2017 in December, right around Christmas. I went to his meetup in Newcastle. It was really fun, but I had never been to a Bitcoin conference before. This is my first one. And the ugly old Bitcoin goat was very kind enough to invite me to speak. I spoke about the Bitcoin meme. That was the title of my talk. And I talk about memes in culture, the general word, not just image memes, but the general word of memes, which is sort of any viral idea in culture. And but it was very special because I got to hang out with Thomas, with whom I've been doing shows for 5 years. And we had an amazing time. We really connected. I was up there with a buddy of mine. We had a great time, and just to meet everybody at the conference was amazing. People were so cool, and it was really intimate. Like the rest of the cruise, there were non-conference people, so that was really strange, to be around a bunch of stuck on a boat with strangers. I wasn't a big fan of that, although the food was pretty good, and I really loved the conference attendees. So everybody that I met out there, I love you guys.
Wow. So the conference was on a boat that had people that were non-conference on it. It was not just.
It was a giant cruise ship. There must have been 4,000 of us or 2,000.
Oh, wow.
2,000. There's a lot. It seemed like zillions. And there was not, it was just a few dozen of us at the conference. Which
did you get any of the normies in the Bitcoin? Did you get any of those cruisers?
I did actually have a couple conversations, and they were so receptive. They're like, yeah, my nephew is, but because there's enough people into it now where everybody knows somebody. And is it a ripe field out there when you plant a seed or whatever. It's just so fertile.
Well, right now, who is buying Bitcoin? Because it doesn't appear the regular retail investor, the regular guy, is buying it right now. Yet the price has been pretty well. Since January, it's gone up quite a bit. Not that I care about the fiat price. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. Remember that. Pound that like button. But who do you think's buying this now? Or is anyone buying it? What do you think about the retail market and newbies coming in?
Certainly people are buying it. I mean, on average, at this price, if it stays flat, that means, 15 million, $16 million a day is actually being injected into the Bitcoin economy because of the, inflation rate. The miner subsidy is creating 1,800 Bitcoins a day right now. Not that they're selling them all on the market right away, but on average, you got to have, about 12, 15 million bucks coming in, new money, brand new capital that being invested directly in Bitcoins, not the companies, not stocks, not anything like that, actually Bitcoin, people actually purchasing it from other people, new money coming in. So that's actually pretty impressive. I mean, you look at a month and, that's whatever, 500 million bucks, $500 million coming in, flowing into the ecosystem every month. That's pretty impressive, even if the price stays flat. So I think it's everybody. I think that actually there are retail investors and people are just quiet about it, like they should be.
That's that. They should be, definitely. But again,
it's both though. It's institutional and everybody.
Yeah. There's anecdotal evidence out there that people who are involved in businesses that deal with Bitcoin, people that I know that sell hardware wallets. They have their business has dropped off a cliff. So to them, it appears there are not a lot of retail people, just common Joes and Janes that are coming in as much as that were coming in back in 2017 and stuff. And,
I think, yes, there was obviously a large influx at that time as shown because there's little liquidity. If a lot of people flood in, the price will go up disproportionately. But as far as the hardware, just remember that every new person is coming in, and yes, the resources are better so they can learn faster, but still they're on a path of learning. It's not like when we came in 5-6 years ago and we had to really do a lot of research ourselves in order to become versed in it. Now you can read some books that are very well written that describe the economics, technology, but it still takes a solid year to get up to speed on what do I do with this thing that's on Coinbase, or whatever. How do I really secure my legacy and make sure that my nephew or my son can get, have it if I die. And it's a complex thing and it takes time. I mean, even for us oldsters, old coiners, there's always new security things, always new things to learn and intense stuff that's happening and more always. So, and each new person has that at least a year or whatever of learning, and they're all staggered at different times.
So you're speaking about in newness. We're in Bitcoin's second decade. You wanted to talk about Bitcoin's second decade.
Yeah, actually, this is a good segue. We were talking about how many people out there are coming in and how many have it. And there's nobody knows and nobody could know, but it's certainly Bitcoin's price and adoption curve metrics, transactions, all that stuff follows. It's obviously geometric or exponential, or it follows a mathematical adoption curve. I actually there was a recent article trying to remember who did it, but it was like a square root chart of the prices that never were seen again. When the last time we saw $5, the last time we saw $100, right? And it's all within this narrow band because it's an adoption curve, right? Where there's a certain amount of people coming in, and the more there are, the more come. On a numeric level, if you got 100 to go to 150 is 50%. If you got a billion people, go to you're adding 500 million in that same proportion. So it's a proportional thing where it's going up by a percentage, a relatively consistent percentage, the number of users. So there's a lot of argumentation. Some people say that there's 5 million, 3 million users out there, or people who own any amount of Bitcoin, and some people are saying it's 70 million. Well, 70 million is 1% of the world's population, and on an exponential chart and a classic adoption curve, 1% is halfway along the curve. So if we are talking about a decade for the first half, conceivably, if we went at the exact same pace, we would reach full adoption of all of humanity after another 10 years. Now, obviously, the rate could change and all this different stuff. It's just a prediction and things like that. But it is interesting to note that particular fact that we probably approach, at some point we will hit 1% of the world's population for sure. We've got to hit 70 million at some point. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happens very soon, if we're already approximately at 50 or 70 million.
I don't think we're at 70 yet, but that is an excellent point about when we hit 70. When we hit 1%, that's halfway on that chart. So that is, I never thought of it that way. That is, I learn something new every day, people. That's why I got this dude on the show. All right, let's go a little beyond Bitcoin here. You have anything to say about Hong Kong?
Yes. Hong Kong, Paris, Venezuela, Argentina, and what's the other? Oh, Catalonia.
Turkey? I don't know.
Is there mass demonstrations in Turkey too?
No, not yet. Well,
mass demonstrations.
Okay, mass demonstration. Okay, no, not well.
There's definitely an upswing in consistent mass demonstration. It's not like 100,000 people came to the main square and it was a big deal and they gave the authorities the jitter. No, this is every Saturday. I mean, look at France. The Yellow Vest movement is not going anywhere. They are very angry and they're speaking out. It's a real problem for Macron. The people are getting harder to govern and control. China is going to have so many more issues on their hands. They already have been cracking down on huge demonstrations for decades. I mean, they have so much unrest that we just don't hear anything about, and they don't even hear about it if they're not nearby, because obviously there's a media blackout and they have so much control. But I wouldn't be surprised. Well, Hong Kong is a bit of a canary in the coal mine for China, I think. We're going to see this trend continue in any jurisdiction that is reaming its populace, which is nearly all of them. I think this trend is going to be on the rise. And what you're going to see is capitulation. The people have understood their power, and they'll never forget it. I don't believe that these demonstrations can be pacified, and I don't believe that they can be cracked down on because of cell phones. Everybody filming everything. 1 second. Can you hear me again?
Yeah, no, it was fine. It just cracked a little.
Everything can be captured and shared with millions and millions and millions of people within minutes of it happening. You can't get away with it. There's no delay there anymore. Before, if you wanted to run an authoritarian dictatorship, say 60s, right? If you're in the third world in the 60s, man, nobody's got any tech to stop you. There's no reporters there. There's maybe one, and you just kill him, no problem. Or maybe there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about this, Uganda or something. Nowadays, You've got 4G. I mean, China's trying to utilize the technologies in order to increase their power and use and create a surveillance state. And it's turning out to be a lot more difficult maybe than they predicted, because human beings tend to think for themselves if they're given the tools. And so I think we're going to see a huge amount of capitulation in the near term. In the next 5 years, we're going to see some huge shifts. We're going to see countries breaking apart. Or we're going to see blocks and political alliances dissolving and reforming in different formations. These are all the canaries in the coal mine. And Hong Kong is a big one, definitely. It's not going to stop. It's going to get worse and worse and worse until finally China backs off. They will. The people are going to win that one.
Wow. There's a lot of people are saying the opposite, that China will smack them down and they will.
Oh, they will.
But
oh no, they're going to try. They're going to try. It's going to get really ugly, and but that's going to be the worst press. That's going to be terrible marketing. That's terrible marketing for China. The threats are horrible marketing. Everyone's going to hate your guts.
Wow. So that the people will not capitulate. It will be eventually the governments that capitulate, you say. I mean,
not even eventually. It's like soonish, around the corner. Soonish, 5 years, within 5 years. The next 5 years are going to see mass capitulation.
I would love that. I keep the faith. I keep the hope. We shall see what happens.
I think next year there's going to be some high level meetings. They're panicking. You know, these guys in Davos and the Bilderberg, those people have lost control of, once again, the narrative. People, they can't get away with their lies and their coercion and their fraud anymore. And they're floundering. They're maybe not getting lynched in the street quite yet, but I think that they are going to be negotiating with some other people. And next year, I think we're going to see some big shifts, even out of the top echelons. It won't only be, coming from the people in the street. It'll be both.
All right, we are getting toward the end of the show here. I want to see if there are any other topics I have. Did you want to say anything about the Gab article that I sent you? How they are? They're trying to go in a different direction than these other social media companies. Free speech money. They're using Bitcoin. They're promoting Bitcoin. They want defiance instead of compliance. And again, You've said you think defiance is going to win out. I see so many people willing to comply. I see so many corporations willing to comply.
Yeah, that's the norm right now. But yes, it will flip. Gab is on the cutting edge of it. They're once again like a canary in the coal mine, right? They tried to deplatform this company, and I think more and more shakers are going to stand up for themselves by claiming their power and saying, you know what? No, I don't agree with that. These tools exist in order to create liberty among humanity. And so we're just going to use them, and fuck you. Excuse my language. But right. That's a very specific usage of that. There's a term, fuck you money, right? This is Nicholas Taleb, right? He's talking about having the freedom to say no. And that this is what I believe is going to be a huge movement, and it's going to freak out the people holding the reins so much that they're going to start capitulating all over the place in different ways, different levels.
Yeah, but certain people that are never going to have the FU money. I think it's the 20-80 rule, baby. This is what I always talk about. I think it's going to be the 20%ers that are going to, over time, wake up, say, we don't want to be part of this matrix anymore. We're opting into the Bitcoin overlay. We're not going to be part of the machine. You guys can have your fun with Facebook coin, with being monitored, with all the so-called convenience. We'll go our own way. We'll be so many people. Their whole definition of life is they must work for someone else. They must have someone else take care of them. And I just think there's certain people that will never want to leave that comfortable room of being taken care of.
I think 2080 is probably a good conservative estimate of that. Yeah, say a couple billion. shakers, which is a huge, I mean, the amount of wealth that you can create about with 2 billion self-starters, and, maybe 6 billion people who are just kicking it and, just watching some TV, eating some popcorn and making some espressos, and it's all good.
There we go. That's going to be our world very soon. All right. Any conclusionary thoughts? Anything that was left out you wanted to add? Anything interesting going on?
Yeah, I kind of want to touch back on my talk on the cruise.
Yeah,
which
please.
I was talking about memes. I was talking about something called a holarchy, which is a idea of a natural hierarchy that which each piece has sort of an echo of the whole, like a fractal, but it's maybe a different type of whole. So it's kind of these related ideas that form a hierarchy of some type. And if there's the structure of the ideas is very important. So keep looking very closely at the narrative that underlies people's statements. Look at the context. What are people saying? What's the meta level, right? I was talking to some guys on Twitter today about, I was trying to emphasize that Trump, part of the reason, in fact, possibly the main reason why he won and why he's able to to grab the zeitgeist right now is his ability to tweet so effectively. He's an incredible tweeter, and his tweets are really defining. They're narrative defining. He uses the tweets very specifically to advance his narrative, and unless you can do that in this day and age, you'll never succeed as a politician in the West. In the developed countries, you have to be an amazing tweeter, or you'll never succeed. And people were saying, well, a lot of Americans don't like that. And on Twitter, they were responding to me. They don't like that. And they're not on Twitter. And I was trying to emphasize that both of those points are so completely irrelevant. Number one, if you're not on Twitter, you'll still see those tweets, because the mainstream media are now way behind the curve, and they are reporting on tweets, which are statements by individuals that cannot be spun, right? That's why it's so powerful. The field, the landscape, political landscape, and the media landscape. When I say media, I mean the communications landscape among mass humanity has changed, absolutely flipped on its head. It's so different now than it was 10 years ago. Because any individual who gets any spotlight on them, which of course is always politicians, but anybody too, you and me, Adam, on Twitter, you have a nearly, censorship-free platform. Obviously it's not quite like that. And eventually we'll be 100% censorship-free with things, decentralized alternative, the next step beyond Gab, right? But even with Twitter, it's so incredibly powerful, this microblogging platform, where I am making a statement, and you can try to spin it in your article, but anyone can easily, instantly, in a second, go and see the source statement that I made, and nobody can change. That is totally different from how the 20th century was. And people love to fight it, and they want their old institutions, that they want the trust that they had, they want the comfort that they used to have in those old institutions, and that's never coming back. The world has changed forever. It will never go back to that, short of an apocalypse, like a mass situation where everything the infrastructure gets destroyed. We're never going back to that trusted media intermediary anymore. Now everyone has their own voice, and you're going to have to judge their positions and what they're doing based on the words that they project out into the world. Times have changed. So when you are looking at those statements that people make, consider the context, consider the meta levels. What is the narrative that they're trying to advance? And what is the context from which they're trying to express something? And what is the demographic that they're trying to reach? What's the target demographic? Who are they trying to trigger, right? Trump is great at combining appeasing his base and triggering his detractors. So he's got this great balance of troll and whatever hero. And that's what kind of a lot of people are trying to do with their personal marketing. So really look carefully and really look to identify any fallacious elements in that structure, where it's like, oh, well, you've made this statement, but actually it relies on two totally contradicting concepts. So I highly recommend that people who want to know more about that in relation to Bitcoin especially, go and check out my talk on YouTube. We'll try to get the link to that.
Yes, I was going to ask you that question, man. You just made me, as some very powerful stuff you just said. I want to watch your speech now. So has it been uploaded? Is it somewhere?
Definitely the full everything was uploaded in one video, I believe, and the separate videos are either on the way or just went up. I need to check.
All right. So you'll send me the full link. I'll link to the full cruise. You guys can find it in there. I'll try to like say what time it was on at and everything. Because this is very interesting stuff. I love it. I think that's a great way to end the show. Get everybody enthused about watching that. All right, Gabriel Divine, thank you for your time today. His Twitter is linked to below. He tweets out a lot of good stuff. Yeah, he goes way beyond me. He goes way beyond Michael Krieger also, but everyone's a unique beast in their own way. And some people really love that stuff that I don't talk about here, but he definitely talks about it. So again, that's This Week in Bitcoin. We bring you the best guest in the freaking space like Gabriel Divine. Every Friday, you can catch this show. Who knows what time it comes on? It depends on where I am. I'll be in Australia next week, so who knows what's going to be going on then. But anyway, I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, Disrupt Meister. I do a new show here every day. Saturday is the Beyond Bitcoin show. Every other day in the week is just the One Bitcoin show. You never know what you're going to get here. Remember, subscribe to the channel, like this video, share this video, check out all the links below, pound that like button, bang the bell button, click on the squares. Shabbat Shalom. We will see you tomorrow, next week, whenever you come back. Thank you all. See you later. Bye-bye.